have told this to no one who lived through it with me, because those who lived through it need no telling, and to everyone else it sounds like a boast. It is not a boast. A boast is a thing you say when you are still afraid the other man might be your equal. By the time the Kelvhar came back, we were not afraid of them at all, and that absence of fear is the hardest part to make you understand, because you did not stand on the ninth kiln and watch their arcs come out of the dark expecting to find us dead. My name is Elias Cade. For 61 years I was a forge-wright on the hearthrug, and for the last 19 of those I was master of the ninth kiln, which is the ninth of the 40 forges we hung in a ring around the earth to make our own suns. I want you to hold that in your mind before I tell you anything else, because everything that happened turns on it. We did not defend the earth with fleets, though we had fleets. We did not defend it with the guns, though the guns were real and I will come to them. We defended it in the end by being a people who had learned to build stars, standing in front of a people who had only ever learned to drink them. The old records call it the first drinking. 40,000 years is a long time for a record to survive, and most of what came down to us came not as history, but as a shape worn into everything we were. The way a river wears a valley, so that the valley remembers the river long after the water is gone. But the core of it we never lost, because we built our whole civilization around never losing it. 40,000 years before the day I am telling you about, a fleet came to our sun and drank from it. Not all of it. That is the part people forget. They did not destroy Saul. They were not barbarians in that sense. They were farmers. They opened our star the way you might tap a tree for sap, took what their arcs could hold and closed the wound and went away. And because a star is a vast thing and even a fleet of drinking arcs can only carry so much at once, they left the rest. They marked it, the records say. They left it to ripen. A star that has been drunk from once will, over tens of thousands of years, settle and brighten and grow rich again, and a patient people can come back for a fuller harvest. The Kelvhar were nothing if not patient. Patience was the only virtue they had, and we would outhold them even in that. What the drinking did to us they never bothered to learn, because to them we were not there. When you tap a tree, you do not inquire after the ants. The theft cooled our sun by a whisper, a fraction of a fraction, and a whisper from a star is an age of ice on the world beneath it. The ashen years, we call that time. I will not give you a number of the dead, because a number is a way of making the unbearable into arithmetic, and I have spent my life refusing that particular comfort. I will only tell you that when the ice finally drew back and what was left of us crawled up out of the deep places and the warm coasts, there were few enough of us that every one of them mattered, and every one of them carried the same thing in the marrow. Someone came and cooled our sun, and did not even see us die. You could build a people on hatred out of that, and for a while, the oldest records suggest, we tried. But hatred is a fire that eats its own hearth. What we built instead was worse for the Kelvhar than hatred, though it took us 40,000 years to make it. We built a resolve so cold and so long that it stopped looking like emotion at all and started looking like engineering. We decided that we would never again be a people whose life hung on a single star that another creature could reach up and drain. We decided we would learn to make fire ourselves, real fire, star fire, the fusion that burns in the heart of a sun, and hold it and control it and grow it, until a star was not our fate but our craft. It took most of those 40,000 years. I want to be honest about that, because the young forgerites on the ring liked to talk as though we had leapt from ashes to suns in a clean, bright arc, and it was not clean and it was not quick. Whole ages went into learning to hold a plasma steady for 1 second, then for 1 hour, then forever. Whole civilizations rose and argued and fell and were rebuilt around the slow work of the forges. There were long dark stretches where the knowledge nearly went out, and it survived only because we had made the survival of it a sacrament, tended by people whose whole lives were the tending. When you spend 100 generations teaching your children that the most sacred thing a person can do is keep one particular flame alive, eventually you get very, very good at keeping flames alive. By my time, we were star makers. I do not say that to impress you. I say it because it is simply what we were, the way you would say a people were farmers or sailors. We ringed the earth with 40 forges and lit 40 small suns in them, and those suns warmed the world and fed the great cities and drove the fleets, and no ant-cooled whisper from old Saul could ever put us in the ice again, because we no longer needed Saul to keep us. We kept ourselves. On the 9th kiln I tended a fire that I had, with my own hands and the hands of the rights under me, coaxed into being out of nothing but cold gas and colder patience, and I could brighten it or bank it or move it or quench it, and I had done all of those things 1,000 times, and it had become as ordinary to me as a hearth is to a housewife. That is the thing you must understand before the arcs came. Making a star had become ordinary to us. It was a Tuesday. It was work. I was banking the 9th's fire down for the maintenance cycle when the deep watch called the ring. I remember I had my hands in the control lattice, feeling the plasma the way you feel bath water, judging by the resistance in my fingers whether she was settling right. Adiz, my second, was across the chamber checking the containment gauss, and the call came over the whole ring at once, on the old channel, the one we kept clear for one purpose and had never once in my life had cause to use. The watch officer's voice was very steady, which is how I knew it was bad. He said, "Contacts at the heliopause, inbound, sublight but decelerating, and the mass signature matches the archive." There was only one archive he could mean. There has only ever been one thing in all our long memory worth keeping a signature of. I took my hands out of the lattice. I remember that the fire kept burning without me, obedient, banked and low. A small sun the size of a cathedral spinning quietly in its cage while at the edge of our solar system, the thing we had spent 40,000 years becoming ready for finally, actually, came back. They came the way the records said they would. That was the first thing that struck all of us, I think, how exactly they matched the old shape of the thing, as though they had not changed at all in 40,000 years, as though we had done all our becoming and they had done none of theirs. The arcs were vast and dark and built for drinking, great blunt vessels like the mouths of things, and they came in a slow procession with the harvest tenders ranked around the drinking arcs, the way honor guards rank around a lord. There were, in the end, a little over 1,000 of them, 1,000 ships to drink a star. It had taken more than that, the records hinted, at the first drinking, but a ripened star gives its sap more freely, and they had come confident that Saul would be soft and rich and unguarded, and that whatever crawled on the third world would be too feeble to matter if it were there at all. They did not hail us. I want you to sit with that because it tells you everything about who they were. They did not hail us because you do not hail a valley when you have come to farm it. They came in past the outer stations. We let them, on the order of the convocation, which had made its decision in a single afternoon and would not be moved from it. And I will tell you what that decision was in its time. And they arrayed themselves around Saul at a careful distance, and they began the harvest rite. We watched it on the ring. Adiz had put it up on the great glass of the 9th's watch wall, and forgerites came off their shifts and stood there in the low red light of the banked fire, and watched the Kelvhar prepare to drink our sun. The rite was slow, and it was, I will admit, beautiful in a cold way. The drinking arcs moved into a great flower shape around the star, opening the vast apertures of their mouths, and between them ran cables of light, tethers of contained force, that linked them each to each until the whole formation was a single lattice, a net of 1,000 ships thrown around a sun. I understood the engineering of it even as I hated it. It was, in its way, a magnificent piece of work. They had built themselves into a mouth big enough to bite a star, and they had done it well, and they had been doing it for so long to so many stars that they had made it into liturgy. And at the center of the flower, on the lead drinking arc, the one the archive shapes named as the seat of the first reaper, a signal finally lit. Not to us, to their own fleet. But we caught it and we unwound it, because we had spent 40,000 years learning the shape of these people so that we would understand them when they came, and among the things we had recovered and reconstructed was the cadence of their command tongue. The first reaper's name, as near as our voice can carry it, was Asun V. His signal to his fleet, as near as our reconstruction can carry it, was the opening of the harvest rite, and it went something like this. Though you must forgive the roughness, because a command tongue built for a mouth that is not a mouth like ours does not come across whole. He said, "The field is ripe." He said, "The small warmth on the third body is nothing. Note it and disregard it." He said, "We mark this star as we marked it before, and we take the fuller measure now, as was promised to us by our fathers who left it to grow. Begin the drawing." The small warmth on the third body. That was us. That was the earth and the cities on it, and the seas we had thawed and re-greened, and the towers, and every soul who had crawled up out of the ashen years and their 40,000 years of children, and the hearthring with its 40 sons and me. Note it and disregard it. He looked at the ring of starfire we had hung around our own world, 40 man-made suns, each one a thing his people had never in all their long theft learned to make, and he saw a small warmth, and disregarded it. I have thought a great deal in the years since about why he did that. It was not stupidity. The Kelvhar were not stupid. You cannot survive as long as they had survived, harvesting your way across 100,000 years of night on stupidity. It was something worse and older than stupidity. It was the certainty of a people who have only ever taken. When the only thing you have ever done to a star is drink it, you cannot conceive of a creature that makes one. When the only relationship you have ever had with fire is theft, a fire maker is not a threat to you. A fire maker is not even a category you possess. He looked at our 40 sons and his mind had no shelf to put them on, and so it put them on the shelf marked warmth, third body, disregard, because that was the only shelf he had. They had come to us as farmers, and farmers do not fear the field. So they began to draw. And this is the part where I have to tell you what the convocation had decided in a single afternoon, because if I do not, you will think what happened next was cruelty, and it was not cruelty, though I will not pretend there was no hardness in it. The convocation had decided that we would let them begin, that we would not fire on the arcs as they crossed our system, not challenge them, not hail them, not warn them. We would let them array themselves around our sun and let them open their mouths and let them start to draw, and only then would we answer. There were those who argued against it. There are always those, and they were not wrong to argue, because letting 1,000 ships put their mouths on your star and start to drink is a terrible thing to permit even for an hour. But the convocation held, and the reason it held was this. We did not want a battle. We had the means for a battle. I will show you the means. But a battle would have made us, in the end, only a stronger kind of the same thing they were, a people who met theft with slaughter and called it justice. And 40,000 years of becoming ready had made us, whatever else it made us, unwilling to become that. We did not want to kill 1,000 ships. We wanted the first reaper to understand. There is a difference, and the whole of what we were had come to live inside that difference. So we let them start to draw, and I stood on the 9th kiln with my hands cold at my sides, and watched the tethers of light between the arcs brighten as the drawing began. Watched the first thread of our sun's substance start to lift toward those vast dark mouths, and I will not tell you it was easy to watch, because it was not. Somewhere under my grief, 40,000 years of grief, all the ashen dead I had never met and would never stop carrying, stood up in me and howled to see it happen again. And I stood still because that was my order and my duty and in the end my faith. We would answer, but we would answer as star makers, not as reapers. We would answer with the thing we were. The answer began on the ring. The order came down the old channel, and it was 3 words, and I have never in my life heard 3 words land with such weight. The order was, "Open the kilns." You must understand what a kiln is, on the hearthring, and what it means to open one. Each of the 40 forges is a cage, a vast lattice of containment fields, and inside the cage burns a star we made. In ordinary times the cage holds the star close and small and safe, so that its light and heat can be tapped and fed to the world without ever touching it directly. To open a kiln is to widen the cage. It is to let the small sun grow, to take the leash off the fire and let it stand up to its full height. We did it, In ordinary times, only in the most careful increments, because a made star is a made star, and it will do what fire does if you let it, which is burn. We opened all 40 at once. I have tried many times to describe what it was to be on the ninth kiln in that hour, standing inside the widening cage with my hands back in the lattice, feeding the fire, letting it stand up, and I have never found the words, because the truth is that it was the most religious moment of my life, and I am not a religious man. The fire I had banked down that morning, the little cathedral-sized sun that had been a Tuesday and a chore, rose up under my hands and grew and grew and grew, until it filled the chamber, until it filled the sky, until the ninth kiln was not a station with a small sun in it, but a sun with a small station somewhere inside it. And I stood in the heart of a star I had made, feeding it, singing to it in the only language it knew, which is the language of fields and forces. And around the earth 39 other Forgerites did the same, and 40 man-made suns stood up to their full and terrible height around our world, and the whole of near-earth space went white. And the Kelvhar at last saw us. I would give a great deal to have seen the inside of First Reaper Asun V's mind in that moment, though I think perhaps it is a mercy that I did not, because I think it may have been the moment a certainty, 40,000 years old, began to die. And the death of an old certainty is not a pretty thing to watch even in your enemy. The reconstruction we have of the Kelvhar command tongue in the hour that followed is broken and partial, because their discipline broke and partial is all a broken discipline transmits. But we caught fragments. We caught the First Reaper's signal to the fleet, and it was no longer the smooth liturgy of the harvestrite. It was a question. He asked his own ships, in the command tongue of a people who had never needed the word before, "What is that light? What is that light?" 40 suns. He had no shelf for it. He looked at 40 stars we had made with our hands and hung around our home like lamps around a table, and the only word his whole vast old civilization could give him was a question a child asks. What is that light? It was the sound of a shelf that had held a certainty for 100,000 years, cracking. We did not fire. I want to be very clear about that, because everything the Kelvhar did next, they did without a single shot being fired at them, and that matters more than any weapon we had. We did not fire. We simply let them see. 40 suns standing up around a world they had come to disregard, and the light of them washing across 1,000 dark drinking arcs and showing the crews of those arcs at last where they truly were. They had not come to a soft ripe star and a feeble warmth. They had come to a forge world. They had come to a people who had spent the whole of the Kelvhar's patient 40,000 years learning to do, deliberately and at will, the thing the Kelvhar could only do by theft. And here is the thing that I think finally reached them, the thing that the light alone could not say, but that the light made them ready to understand. A drinking arc is a mouth. Its whole design, its whole genius, is the taking in of fire. It has no shelf for the making of fire either, but it has, of necessity, a very deep and very old understanding of fire's substance. You cannot drink a star for 100,000 years without coming to know, in your instruments and your hulls, exactly what a star is. So when 40 man-made suns stood up around the earth, the Kelvhar arcs, whatever their crew's certainties, could read the fire. Their instruments told them the truth even as their minds resisted it. These were not natural stars. These had no long history, no ancient birth in a collapsing cloud. These were young, hours young, some of them in the deep sense, and stable and held and controlled, and there were 40 of them, and every reading screamed the same impossible sentence into the Kelvhar's ancient sensoria. These were made. These were made. A people down there had made these and could, presumably, make more. That was the moment the harvestrite ended, not by our hand, by theirs. The tethers of light between the arcs that had thrown a net around our sun and begun to drink, they went dark. All along the great flower formation, the drawing stopped. The threads of our sun's substance that had begun to lift toward those mouths fell back. 1,000 ships that had come to farm a star lowered their heads from it all at once, and turned, slowly, the whole vast flower turning like a face, to look at the earth and its 40 suns. And that is when the first reaper hailed us. He hailed us. After coming 40,000 years and 100,000 and marking our star to ripen and returning to farm it, after looking at our world and calling it a warmth to be disregarded, First Reaper Asan V opened a channel to the third body he had not deigned to notice and asked to speak. The convocation gave the speaking to a woman named Usold Re, who was neither a soldier nor a lord but a forgerite, the master of the first kiln, the oldest of us. A woman who had made fire for 90 years and whose hands, they said, could feel a plasma's mood through a lattice better than any instrument. I think the choice was deliberate, and I think it was right. They did not send Asan via a general or a queen. They sent him a fire maker, an old woman who smelled of ozone and had scorch scars up both her forearms, because that was the truth of what we were, and they wanted him to hear it from the truth's own mouth. I heard the exchange, as all the ring heard it, over the old channel. I will not pretend I can give you every word, because their tongue and ours do not meet cleanly, and much of it came through in the halting, doubled way of a hard translation. But I can give you the shape of it, and the shape of it is the thing that has never once left me. The first reaper spoke first, and there was in his voice, even across the gulf of a tongue built for a mouth that is not a mouth, something that our translators, who had studied the Kelvhar all their lives, said they had never encountered in any Kelvhar transmission ever recovered. There was uncertainty, he said. We did not know this world was tended. He said, we marked this star long ago by the right of first drawing and returned by that right to take the fuller measure. He said, and here the translators flagged the phrasing as strange, as almost a question dressed as a claim. The small warmth was not marked as a maker of stars. Usold Re let a silence sit before she answered. I have thought about that silence many times. It was the silence of 40,000 years, and she made him hold it. Then she said, you drank from our sun once. You did not mark us. You did not see us. You cooled our star by a whisper and left us to the ice, and you did not stay to learn what a whisper does to a world. We spent the age you gave us learning what you did. And then we spent the ages after it learning to make certain it could never be done to us again. The first reaper said, then you are a maker of stars. And Usold Re, I can hear her still, the flatness of it, the 90 years of scorch behind it. Usold Re said, we are a people who remembered. There was a long quiet, and then Asan V asked the question that his whole civilization had come across the dark to ask without knowing it, the question that I think was the true reason 100,000 years of reapers had been drinking their way across the night, the question none of them had ever been able to answer, and that they had covered over with the patient liturgy of theft, because they could not bear that they could not answer it. He asked us to teach him. He said, and the translators, who had no reason to soften it, soften nothing, he said. Our stars are dying. He said, we do not make, we take. And there is less and less to take, and the taking grows longer, and our fathers taught us the right of drawing but not the right of making, because they did not have it, and their fathers did not have it, and back into the dark none of us have ever had it. He said, you have it. He said, teach us to make fire, and we will never drink from your star again, and we will go, and you will have peace of us forever. And I stood in the heart of the small star I had made, with my hands in the lattice and 40,000 years of the ashen dead standing up in me, and I will confess to you that in that moment I wanted us to say yes, not out of mercy. I am not sure I had mercy in me for them then, and I am not sure I have it now. I wanted us to say yes because it was the largest thing we could possibly do, and there is a hunger in a maker to make even his enemy, to reach down into a people who have only ever taken and hand them the thing that would let them stop. It would have been the most magnificent act in our whole long history, to teach the reapers to make, to end the drinking of stars forever everywhere by the simple grace of giving away the fire. The convocation had foreseen that the question would come. Of course they had. They had spent 40,000 years foreseeing, and they had decided in that single afternoon what our answer would be, and the answer was no, and I have spent the rest of my life understanding why, and I think now I do understand it, and I am going to try to give it to you the way it was finally given to me." Usld said, "No." She said it plainly, the way she said everything. And then, because she was a maker and not a reaper, she did not leave it as a wound. She explained. She said, "I will not teach you to make fire. Not because I fear you and not because I hate you, though there are those of my people who do, and they have earned the right. I will not teach you because the making of fire is not a thing that can be given the way you gave us the ice. You want the right of making the way you have the right of drawing, a procedure, a liturgy, a thing your fathers can hand your children whole. There is no such thing. We did not receive the making. We became it. It took us 40,000 years, and it did not take us 40,000 years because the knowledge is large, though it is large. It took us that long because to make a star you must first become a people who would rather make than take, and that becoming cannot be taught in a transmission. It has to be suffered into being. If I handed you the whole of our craft this hour, you would use it as you use everything. You would build a mouth of it and drink faster, and the dying of your stars would only come quicker because you would still be reapers, only with a sharper tool. The fire is not the gift. The 40,000 years are the gift, and those we cannot give you. Those you would have to earn as we did in the dark without us." There was a silence after that longer than the first. And then Asan said the last thing he said to us, and it is the only thing any Kelvhar ever said that I have kept, the way you keep a thing that is heavier than you expected when you picked it up. He said, "Then we have come a very long way to be shown a thing we cannot have." And Usld said, "Yes, now you know how it feels." They did not fight us. I have to keep saying it because I know how you have imagined this ending, how you want the 40 sons to lash out, how you want the mouths that came to drink our star to be burned for their arrogance, and I understand the want, because I have carried it too, up out of the ashen years with all the rest of my inheritance. But that is the reaper's ending, and we were not reapers. We stood 40 suns up around our world, and we let 1,000 ships look at them, and we told the first reaper the truth, which was that we would not give him the fire and we would not take his fleet, and then we simply waited, 40 suns burning, for him to understand that both of those things were the same act. We were not sparing them out of weakness. We could have unmade every ship in that flower, and they knew it, and the knowing was the whole of our defense. We were sparing them out of the thing we had become instead of them. A maker does not have to destroy what he does not fear. That is the reaper's compulsion, not the maker's. We had spent 40,000 years learning the difference, and now we made them watch us live it. The flower unmade itself. Slowly, over hours, the 1,000 ships drew back from our sun, the drinking arcs closing their vast mouths, the harvest tenders falling into their long ranks, and the whole formation gathered itself and turned outward, toward the dark, toward whatever dying stars they had left to drink, and began the long deceleration into departure. We tracked them all the way to the heliopause and past it, and we did not fire, and they did not turn back, and eventually they were only a signature at the edge of our instruments, and then they were not even that, and Saul burned on behind them, whole, undrunk hours, warming a world we had thawed with our own hands and hung with our own suns. I banked the 9th kiln down that night. I took the fire that had stood up to fill the sky and I coaxed it small again, back into its cage, back into a cathedral-sized sun spinning quietly where it belonged, and it came down under my hands as obedient as it had risen, because it was mine, because I had made it, because that is what it means to make a thing instead of stealing it, that it comes when you call and it goes when you bank it and it does not resent you, because you are not its thief, you are its maker. And I stood in the low red light of the banked fire, the way I had stood that morning before the watch officer's steady voice came down the old channel, and I put my hands in the lattice and felt the plasma's mood, and it was calm, and I found that I was weeping, and I did not entirely know why. I know now. It has taken me the rest of my life, but I know now. I was weeping for the ashen dead, the ones I never met, the 40,000 years of children who crawled up out of the ice carrying the thing that made us. Someone came and cooled our sun, and did not even see us die. And I was weeping because that day, for the first time in all our long memory, they had finally seen us. First Reaper Asan V had come across 100,000 years of night to farm a warmth, and had gone home instead, having looked, at last, upon the people he had cooled, and having learned that we had spent every one of the years he gave us becoming something he could not steal, could not drink, could not even be taught. He had come to disregard us, and he had left knowing our name, and our name was Maker, and it was a name he would carry back to his dying stars and never, ever be able to speak, because he had come a very long way to be shown a thing he could not have. We did not win a battle that day. I want that to be the last thing I tell you, because it is the truest. There was no battle. A battle is a thing that happens between two peoples who are still, in the deepest place, the same kind of thing. We had spent 40,000 years making certain we were no longer the same kind of thing as the Kelvhar, and so when they finally came back for the fuller measure they had promised themselves, there was nothing for them to have a battle with. There was only a world of makers and 40 suns, and an old woman with scorch scars on her arms telling the truth into a cold channel, and 1,000 ships turning away into the dark to go home and die a little more slowly than they had come. They left our sun to ripen once. They meant it as arithmetic, a field marked, a harvest deferred, a whisper of theft to be collected at leisure. They did not know, could not know, would spend 100,000 more years of dwindling, never quite letting themselves know what a patient people does with the time you leave them. We took the age they gave us, and we did not spend it hatting, though we had cause, and we did not spend it arming, though we did arm. We spent it becoming star makers. And when they came back to collect, they found that the ripening they had left us to had ripened something they had never planted and could never reap. A people who had learned to make the very fire they lived by stealing, and who would not, in the end, hand it over, because some things cannot be given. They can only be suffered into being, alone in the dark, across 40,000 years of remembering. I banked my fire and I wept, and in the morning it was a Tuesday again, and I put my hands back in the lattice, and the small sun I had made warmed the world, and there was work to do.